The leadership of the Senate of Nigeria has asked heads of military and security agencies in the country to start prosecuting suspected members of the public who are involved in oil theft. The Senate Ad hoc Committee on Oil Theft said it has started investigations into oil theft and illegal bunkering in the Niger Delta region. Meanwhile, a London-based magazine, The Economist, noted that while a surge in oil prices could do astonishing things, like in Saudi Arabia, where a futuristic city was planned to rise from the desert, and in Angola, where its currency has suddenly become one of the strongest performers against the dollar, the reverse is the case in Nigeria, where a rare opportunity of global rise in oil prices is being squandered to grow the economy. Joining us now to discuss this issue of oil theft in Nigeria and the current global oil boom is Alexander Ogedegbe, former Nigeria National Petroleum Corporation NNPC Group Executive Director in charge of the Engineering and Technology Directorate. Good morning, Mr. Ogedegbe, and thank you very much for joining us. Good morning.
Good morning.
Thank you for joining us. Well, The Economist, in a detailed report, is saying that Saudi Arabia is benefiting, as well as other countries, from the global oil boom. Angola is even so comfortable, it now lends money to its former colonial master. But Nigeria is part of this oil boom. We're fifth largest crude oil producer in the world. But here, all we're talking about is subsidy, poverty, and The Economist even adds that it's surprised by the fact that in a very bizarre manner, Nigerian government is even handing out pipeline surveillance contracts to Tompolo, who was specifically mentioned. This is the problem. This is the dilemma. Nigeria is losing heavy revenue. What do you think is the problem? And what is the solution?
Thank you very much. The very deep problem is a lack of competence in our productive capacity. And in the last 20 years, the contribution of the leadership has gone down. I'm talking of the technical leadership has gone down considerably to the point where we cannot take advantage of the facilities we have. I'm talking of the resources as well as the projects. So there has been little or no improvement in the last 20 years, especially in productivity in the NNPC portion of it. Not to talk of the financing. Of course, you are all aware of the problem of the environment, where I'm talking of the producing environment where investment has been stifled since about 5 years ago. If you recall, as early as 2018 or 17, the expectation of new investment was about $16–17 billion. Only 3 or 4% of this came up. And, that is the main source. So when there's no investment and there's no productivity, but you just have a decline. That's what we've been having, rather than the other way around. It's going to take quite a bit of change in attitude and investment in manpower. The competence of NNPC has declined so much technically that it's difficult for them to keep abreast.
Right, thank you, sir. So
that is my first take.
Do continue. I thought you'd finish speaking.
No, well, so whereas most of the other countries you've mentioned, Saudi Arabia, even Qatar, very far away from the European situation, are taking advantage. We are unable to do so because all our projects, especially the LNG and the LNG projects, are way behind. Train 7, that is supposed to have been come on stream within the last couple of years, is still way behind. There's a new project, the flowing LNG FLT. Again, all of this will take another 2 or 3 years. So we are really doing a catch-up, if at all. But we need the competence of the leaders in the oil and gas industry to perform.
Right, so you just mentioned the phrase catch-up, which I guess is my question to you. We all know that Seneca quotes that luck is when preparation meets opportunity. From what you've said, we have failed to prepare for this moment in time, but can we catch up, and how is it possible to actually take advantage of the current climate?
Catching up is a decision we have to take internally, and until we have the competence, it's going to be difficult to predict. I mean, if you look at the position of NNPC, we who are retirees of NNPC, we are quite disappointed in the way it's performing. Of course, it's there in front, but it's not having any support from the back, because all the oil companies have no confidence in its leadership. They won't say so, but it will always be reflected in the level of investment and productivity.
So part of this argument, a lot of people are also saying, apart from theft of crude oil and all of that, that the technical angle too is really disrupting production. That most of the wells are old and they've not put in money to invest in them for a while, and that's why we're not getting, oil out to meet our quotas. The technical investment, the technical angle, the partners are not putting money in it. Could also be a factor?
Yes, this is the whole issue about investment. When you have reserves, for instance, in the oil portion of it, when you have reserves and you do not have expansion, they are not. The gas investments in the last 10 years have been almost nil. I mean, there are no new wells. The old wells are being overdrawn. And if you look at the tendency to just wait and wait, the oil companies are not investing. Probably Seplat is the only one that has been doing it until they now join forces with ExxonMobil. So that is the crux of it. The wells can only produce and decline in production rate. You have to have new wells, development wells, even some appraisal wells. But none of this has materialized in the last 4 or 5 years, especially. So that is the problem. Our production is not keeping in line with the reserves. Plenty of reserves, but if you don't invest, you cannot produce.
Well, sir, I would like to ask you 2 questions. One, the Senate has tried to wade into this. And the Senate president was saying the way forward is to ensure prosecution. And also for the judiciary to ensure expeditious consideration of matters relating to crude oil theft. Do you think that will help? Or the Senate of Nigeria is just making the usual political statement? Second, you talked about competence at the level of the NNPC. Well, as you well know, the NNPC is in transition. Do you think that this transition, by the time it's fully completed, that the NNPC, now NNPC Limited, will be able to make a difference?
Frankly speaking, I haven't seen any difference between NNPC Limited and NNPC. And maybe we will see something when it's rolled out properly. But what I would be advising is the investment in training. Because when I look back 10, 15 years, I don't see people who are replacing those who are leaving. I don't see improvement in the productivity of the various companies in NNPC. So that is a very major area. Now, as far as the crude oil theft is concerned, this is completely, it's a complete security problem. And unless that is really handled, NNPC cannot handle security outside its limits. There is absolutely, they have no facility, no competence even to do it. Awarding contracts, of course, is all they can do. But if you award contracts to people who cannot do it, or who don't have the basic infrastructure, then you have to rely on the what do you call it, security services. Now, I really have no clue about that area, so I don't want to go into that. I don't know what the Navy can do. I don't know what the other security services are set up. I know there used to be some cooperation between the Nigerian government and the U.S. government for this side of the Atlantic, but it's more than that. Most of the crude oil theft is done, should I say, from what we hear, more or less very, very openly. So it's not a question of even the Navy going after ships if the ships have been loaded unlawfully.
What do you make of the surveillance contract that's come under some criticism from certain quarters and approval from other quarters given to a former militant by the name of Tom Polo?
I can only speak on basis of experience, what we had before. If there's cooperation between the community and the NNPC and government, I mean real cooperation, not based on corruption or siphoning funds away, then that kind of contract works. But when you have contractors that don't have even the facility or the backing of their community, it's very difficult for anything to happen. And then there's the side of it, where there's a cooperation between all those forces involved and the smugglers. That's why it's been easy to smuggle as much as 300,000 barrels per day. There's no way you can take this amount of crude oil out of the country just by using small barges or using small taps in the pipeline. These are very, very sophisticated and well-oiled steel.
Okay, so I'd like to ask you, why is it that it's difficult for us to get investment in these various sectors that will help us, our oil sector, that will help us drive our production numbers? Is it because the policy framework on ground is faulty?
Well, to be frank with you, when we observe from outside, I don't even see effect of any policy framework. I see just discussions and discussions and discussions. If there are policy framework, everybody will know, and they'll be publicized, and you as press can even monitor. Can you show me a written policy that you can refer to? All we hear is pronouncements.
About the Petroleum Industry Act, is that not a framework?
Well, Petroleum Industry Act, let's look at all the gains it's supposed to have. The only gain that I can see today, and to be frank with you as a Nigerian, is that for once, the community's area of it, that is 3% of the profits realization, has been formalized, has been established. Now, the ball is in the part of the communities to organize themselves into a corporate entity so that they can receive their 3% share and use it properly. But the rest of it, there's no difference, no change. All we have is a change of names, NAPIMS and the three other entities that are there now. Nothing has changed as far as operations of the oil and gas sector.
So
nothing has changed.
Mr. Ogedegbe, you were Group Executive Director in charge of the Directorate of Engineering and Technology. And it's interesting to have you on the program accusing your former company, former employer of incompetence. Where did the rain begin to beat us? Only this week, Femi Falana SAN was saying that, look, this challenge of crude oil theft, after all, Nigeria invested so much money in technology to track the movement of crude oil assets. Why is it that is not working? That Nigeria also has access to Lloyds, an international organization that tracks the movement of crude oil across the world. What exactly happened? How did the investment in technology break down? How did data just disappear? When did it start? During your time or after you left office?
Well, I left office 19 years ago, and I don't like to give excuses for it. But I can tell you, when we were in office, you could look at every level of manning. I'm talking of staffing. You will see competence, you will see experience. Let's put the names and experience of all the leaders now in the company. Expose it and see where they've worked, what they've done, how many people who, at the level of executive director, like for instance, has ever drilled a well or been in an operating position or appreciates what it takes to run a facility. That is the problem. When you have the companies being manned by people who have no hands-on experience that you can talk about, then what are we talking about?
So what would you like to see happen with the recruitment process, which is clearly fundamental here, and also training? What exactly should be done going forward?
Well, what I would like to see, in fact, it will start from very basic. I mean, let's take the case of the refineries. When we were building refineries in those days, parallel to that, we were recruiting and training. So when the refineries were built, the people, the operators and the technical services providers were available immediately upon completion of the projects. Can we say the same thing now for any of the NNPC projects? That as they are participating in a project, whether they can bring out the staff, they can say we've done this training, we can say when this thing goes on stream and it will run. What I've seen in the last 20 years is NNPCs outsourcing all the technical capabilities. And when the source of the outsourcing does not work, you can't blame anybody else. So that is the problem. We have to we have to recruit the right people and train them. And then this goes up with experience. NPDC, that's supposed to be the flagship of production in NNPC, specializes in outsourcing. That is the problem.
So I'd like to ask, then who do we put the blame on for this dearth of talent over the years and this lack of seriousness, in the NNPC, and probably this level of unexplained connivance and corruption that happens? Because what you're saying is that you left a better place than it is now.
You see, it's deteriorated over many years. If you look again, I can always use the example, the experience I had in 1991. Nigeria was producing 100% of its requirements for products. Okay, all the refineries were running, some 90%, some 80%. I'm talking about the three refineries: Warri, Kaduna, and Port Harcourt. Slowly, because of attrition of experienced staff and lack of proper funding and maintenance, the capacity decreased. In 2012, I was part of a team that evaluated the refineries. And at that time, the production was about 30 or 40% compared to what it was in 2000, 10 years earlier. And without proper training, maintaining of the technical capability, the only thing can happen is to go down and import more. In the last 5 years, all the refineries have been shut down. Not a single liter of petrol is being produced from any of the refineries. And then, with all the promises, nothing is happening. The $1.5 billion we have invested in Port Harcourt refinery in the last 1 year is not going to produce any liter of petrol in the next 1 year. I am sure of that. Because the projects are behind schedule. Again, it's a matter of competence and having the right people there. Check all the refineries today. Who are the managing directors of all the refineries? Do they have any experience in running refineries? Are they engineers? When we were there in NNPC, You could not be a chief executive of any of those companies, subsidiaries, if you have not had a basic training and experience in that sector. Today, that's not the case.
Good. Now you are talking about the refineries. The presidential candidate of the People's Democratic Party was in Lagos yesterday. He will be in Ibadan yesterday. And when he was addressing the Lagos Chamber of Commerce and Industry yesterday at a forum, he said one of the first things he will do will be to sell off the refineries, and that he will have a handshake across to the private sector. Would selling off the refineries solve the problem?
Well, you see, 20 years ago, I was one of those advocates for that the possibility of refining, repairing and refining the industry. I am still 100%, at least whether as of now, in support of privatizing the refineries. But when I say privatizing, I mean majority shareholding for competent operators. So when you're saying sell off, you are talking about just the process of selling. It's more complicated than that. You know, more than in 2017, I wrote a personal letter to the Minister of Finance to talk about how to sell the refineries in a way that is productive. Our report of 2012 shows exactly how it's supposed to be done. In other words, majority shareholding with at least 25-30% of the government or NNPC, so that you can still continue to get your dividends from proper production of refineries. But under the present circumstances, yes, the NNPC is incapable of running the refineries because all the staff that were trained and had experience are no longer there. That is the one thing. So anybody who talks about privatizing the refineries, I'm in support. However, it's not just selling it to your friends and then nothing happens. Proper bidding will have to be done. But more importantly, before you sell the refineries, you must remove the subsidies. Nobody will invest in refineries, make products, and sell them at half the price that Ghana or Cameroon is selling. It's not possible. They will not make money, and they will go bankrupt, just like the government has gone bankrupt in the refineries. The refineries have not produced for 5 years, and we are paying staff several billion naira every year. No private company can maintain that kind of facility. So, just talking about this thing in the air, sell off the refineries, is not just the solution. It is to do it properly. And how are you to do it properly? The way you sold LMA Petrochemical is the way to do it properly. You get investors coming in there, they use the existing staff of NNPC, that was, I'm talking of 15, 20 years ago. LMA Petrochemical was properly, should I say, sold. Before it was sold, it was producing at 15 or 20% production because the management was very, very bad. When it was sold, within 12 months, it started producing at 100%, using the same NNPC trained staff, but under foreign management. Within one or 2 years, they were able to pay off the value of their investment. We need to do the kind of proper selling or privatization. And more importantly, we must remove subsidies. The price of the product must reflect the cost of production. That is what happens everywhere in the world. Until we remove subsidies, no private investor will come in for the refineries. Anybody who comes in is just trying to take money from NNPC and government. Giving a contract to a private investor to run Port Harcourt or Warri refinery without ownership, they will just be taking money and nothing will happen. But if the price of PMS is such that when they produce, they can sell and make profit, then you can have proper privatization of the refineries.
Right. That will be a political decision, which it appears that different governments that we've had have been reluctant to make. But what is your... unfortunately, we appear to have run out of time. No, I can? I'm sorry, sir, for the confusion. What is your take on the government's activities so far with regards to oil theft? there has been progress made. It's been reported. There have been about 120 arrests. There's been crude oil being recouped and what have you. And there's a platform, an IT platform, whereby host communities can report oil theft. Do you think that this would be effective? What do you make of all of that?
Again, I must confess, I'm not an expert in security affairs, and I am yet to see the structure on the ground, because again, we rely on only what either the government tells or the press can get. Going deeper into the causes, into the actual implementation of these security contracts is something I don't know. I don't like to talk about something that I'm not very sure about. So we just have to wait and see.
All right. So, I mean, you've been able to paint a very bleak picture of what goes on in the NNPC, and it's quite shocking that a lot of people are getting these startling revelations from you. The question will be, the government has finally given this contract to revamp the refinery. You say the project is behind schedule. Should we wait on that? Because at some point we need to pull our subsidies. They say we can't do capital project next year, and you say the project is behind schedule. Should we wait on that, or should we wait on the Dangote refinery now?
Well, to be frank with you, as far as I'm concerned, to a large extent, I don't really know how the NNPC is going to be easily reformed in a short period. Everything takes time. When we were building refineries, we started training people the first year of the project. It took 2.5 years to do it. So within 2.5 years, the refinery was ready, and the trained staff was ready. So it's going to take quite a bit. NNPC has gone down in the last 10 years. It's going to take another 6, I don't know how long, but you have to start somewhere and do it right. We need competent leadership in the corporation. I'm talking of experienced and competent leadership. I'm not talking about commercial ventures or outsourcing projects. I'm talking of projects that are inherent and kept by the NNPC. I would like to challenge them. In the last 20 years, how many projects have been started and completed by NNPC and run? That is the problem.
Thank you very much, Mr. Ogedegbe. I wouldn't be surprised if the NNPC management responds to you to say, well, they are also very competent, successors of your period at the NNPC. But thank you very much for joining us. Thank you indeed.